Good morning. I'm Julie Pinsino, and I'm happy to serve this congregation as a member of your Board of Trustees. Thank you for joining with us in person and online. And please scan the QR code on the screen. It's right up there. To let us know that you are here, get a digital version of our order of service, and to find our donation page. If you're visiting with us this morning, welcome. We have a first-time visitor gift for you at the greeters table, if you haven't already picked up your copy of our welcome book. And we have a few announcements this morning. Please join us today in Beach Hall for our annual engagement fair. You can register for classes, sign up to be a part of a group, or find so many ways to volunteer. And now I would like to welcome Ed, one of our auction team members, to share more about our annual auction. Oh, that's not Ed.
I guess we had a little communications breakdown there. Good morning. I'm Kathy O'Neill on the auction team. By now, you should have your calendars marked for Fall Festival and Auction on October 21st. If you haven't marked your calendar yet, please do. Last week, we announced the opening of registration on our new Octria auction website. If you haven't registered yet, please do. This week, we're announcing we're open for donations. We're happy and excited that several of you have entered donations already. For those who haven't, the deadlines are coming up fast. If you're thinking of donating something, now is the time to do it. So people browsing the catalog will have plenty of time to see it before bidding opens on October 6th. That's less than 3 weeks away. If you haven't thought about donating something, please do. This is our church's biggest fundraiser, and purchasing events or services is a wonderful way to get to know your fellow UUs better. Members of the auction team will be in Beach Hall after the service to answer any questions you may have. Please do stop by and see us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Mayab. I also have the pleasure of serving as your board, but I am here today to express our deepest gratitude to all of you who have and continue to volunteer here at First UU. Thank you for being the treats that you are. For everyone who does a little extra. For those of you who help out in a crunch, too far in locker. Even if you feel like a sucker, Billy Davidson. You're the biggest smarties in the bunch. There will never be a payday, Deborah Boyd. And we may never repay the favor, Christine Davidson. Their work will always be good and plenty, Dave Richter. But all our volunteers are truly lifesavers. You all make our church sweet. I was just telling you to sing. Hold on a minute. Please rise. As you are willing and able in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place.
Good morning. I am Amanda Hayes, and I proudly serve as your Justice Minister. And on behalf of the Unitarian Universalist Church of First Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbus, welcome this morning. We begin this service by acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Adena, Hopewell, Wyandotte, Miami, Seneca, Erie, and Cayuga people. We cultivate this awareness that concrete acts of solidarity, healing, and reparation may accompany our symbolic acknowledgments.
And good morning again. You can say good morning. That's good. Thank you. I'm the Reverend Terasa Cooley. I'm your developmental minister. My pronouns are she and her. Friday night began the Jewish celebration of Rosh Hashanah. It signifies the new year, not just a calendar year, but a commemoration of the beginning of creation. It is customary to blow the shofar, an ancient instrument to signal this beginning, and so Steve Moak will do this for us. Year upon year, the seasons come and they go. Decade upon decade, the years arrive and escape. Century upon century, millennia upon millennia, and yet my hopes remain. Not that this year shall be different to me than others before, but that I shall be different to it, to life, in the months that now begin. More open to the truth that persist, though we shall not, to human feelings, to kindness, to duty. Maybe if I yell it loud enough, it's a whole new year. It's a whole new year. I may wake from the dreamless sleep and lead my feet upon new paths, dangerous, promising, and fresh. It's a whole new year. Let it be like an alarm clock. Good morning, world. May this one be the occasion for us for reawakening and faith reborn. Each of us shouting at ourselves together, wake up, take heart, it's a whole new year. And again with the shofar. Excellent, thank you. And now our children are invited to meet Gus in the hallway to get ready to help us bring in the light. And excellent. I offer this chalice lighting, spark of the Spirit cupped in earth's embrace, light of love alive in all creation. As we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life.
Thank you, Calliope, for your help lighting our chalice this morning. Good morning. I'm Amber Scott, your Director of Religious Exploration, and my pronouns are she, they. Taking a look at all of the young people who are here with us this morning, I'm wondering who likes to sing? Me too. Well, I've got some good news for you. Aaron Rother is here to tell us a little bit about Peace Pals Children's Choir.
Hello, everyone. As Amber said, my name is Erin Rother. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Peace Pals Choir Director. Peace Pals is a children's choir ranging from ages 5 to 10, but if you're interested in singing and you want to come, I can work with you a little bit there on the age. And we will be meeting this Sunday and every first, second, and third Sunday of every month, right here in the worship center. So if you have a child or grandchild or a kid that you know that is interested in singing, feel free to come join us today after the service here in the worship center, or October 1st is our next meeting. And I'll also be at the music table in Beach Hall following the service if you have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. We hope to see some kiddos back here at Peace Pals practice later from 11:30 a.m. to noon. Today's story is called The Sour Grape, written by Jory John and illustrated by Pete Oswald. I'm a sour grape. If somebody upsets me, wrongs me, or insults me, I'll never forget it. Grrr! I'm holding a grudge. Banana slipped and bumped into me. Orange didn't call me back. Lime borrowed my scarf and never returned it. I suppose I've got pretty thin skin for a grape. Nobody steps on me. Granted, it wasn't always this way. I grew up in a close-knit bunch. We were sweet to each other. We all lived on a vine. Sure, it was a bit claustrophobic, especially when we were trying to get ready in the morning. But my family was ripe with humor, goodwill, and warmth. We did our best with what we had. My grandparents visited on weekends. They said it takes a bunch to raise a seed, and that good grapes roll their own way in life. They told us to be kind, forgiving, considerate, and grapeful. Above all, no matter what life throws at you, and there will be a lot, try to stay sweet. For a while, I was the sweetest of the sweet. I said please and thank you and brushed aside life's annoyances. But one day, something changed. It was my birthday. I had spent weeks planning a big party and sent out invitations with the date prominently displayed. I had a Ferris wheel, a magician, hay rides, and snacks upon snacks, plus a fireworks display at sundown. I stood out front with a gigantic smile on my face and waited for folks to arrive. I waited, and waited, and waited. A tumbleweed rolled by. Oh! A coyote howled in the distance. The sun sank, and yet I waited. Nobody showed up. I mean, nobody. By the time the fireworks started, I was scowling. I considered everybody I invited, and only one thought came to mind: grudge. Grudge, 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 grudge! After that, my personality became something else entirely. I went from a sweet grape to a bitter grape to a snappy grape. Finally, I became a sour grape. Urgh. I started holding major grudges. I scowled so much that my face got all squishy, and I took my grumpiness out on others. Watch where you're going. Don't even bother calling me back. Are you ever going to return my scarf? That's how it's been, day after day, but something happened recently that changed my thinking. I was going to meet up with my friend Lemon, the only fellow I know who's as sour as I am. Usually, we sit on a bench at the park and rant about stuff. As I was heading out the door, I bumped my knee. Then I discovered I had a flat tire. I missed the bus, and the next bus was late. Finally, I got off at the wrong stop. By the time I arrived, it was getting dark. Lemon was fuming and furious with a frown and a furrowed forehead. His face looked all squishy. You're 3 hours late! I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He'd already made up his mind to form a huge grudge. I couldn't believe it. How unfair, I thought. How ridiculous. How similar to the way I would react. Lemon was pretty worked up, pacing back and forth, grumbling. His tone was tart. So I gave him space. Besides, it was nice out. I noticed the sky changing colors, birds chirping, the evening breeze, and the buzz of insects coming alive at night. Suddenly, I felt grateful, peaceful, and calm. Had I been missing all this simple beauty because I was too busy complaining? Meanwhile, Lemon stormed off, muttering something about disrespect and lack of consideration. I walked home and pulled out a dusty box of old family photos. I spotted myself in one of the pictures. I was so sweet. I knew that little grape from the photo was still a big part of me deep down. It would just take some work to get back there again. Then I found the invitation for my infamous birthday party, the one where nobody showed up. Wait a minute. I told everyone to come on the wrong day. It was all my fault. I realized nobody's perfect, not even me. After that day, I started to notice how being sour all the time is so draining. I'd wasted so much energy holding grudges when I could have easily cleared the air when I felt hurt. I still get upset from time to time, and that's okay. Now I talk, listen, and work things out instead of just walking away. My sourness is fading. I'm letting go of all my grudges. Slip-ups happen. I'm just glad you're okay. That scarf looks sublime on you. Why don't you keep it? Aren't you grateful we got to catch up? Sure, sometimes I still let it out a little when I'm frustrated, like this. Grrr! But then I move on. My face is less squishy, too. Oh, and don't worry. Things are okay with Lemon again. Gosh, sorry I'm late. You must be furious. No big deal, my friend. If you look at things in the right way and remember to be kind, considerate, forgiving, and grateful, life really can be pretty sweet. The end. In this story, the sour grape discovers that grace and compassion make life sweeter. Today, as we examine our potential for forgiveness, I invite you to consider what grudges are making your face all squishy that you may be able to release. I now invite the congregation to form a sheltering arc of love as we sing our young people back to their families and out to class.
Our Share the Plate partner for September is the League of Women Voters of Metropolitan Columbus. The League encourages informed and active participation in government. Please use the QR code on the order of service, text the number on the screen, or go to our website, firstucolumbus.org, and click the Donate tab to give as you feel called. Your gifts help build a better church and a better world. Thank you. Our offering will now be gratefully received.
Let us lift up some joys and sorrows among you. John McChrystal's father died on September 6th, and we hold the McChrystal family in our hearts in their grief. We are asked to hold up Raina and her family as they navigate care for their family matriarch. Linda Thompson is now home and recuperating from her stroke and appreciates all the ways in which this community has shown her love and support. Happy birthday to Michael Greenman, who turned 80 on the 13th. As well as to Kathleen Boston, who turned 91 yesterday. And Oma is home recovering from knee replacement surgery. She needs no help at this time, but definitely cards are welcome. As we watch with horror the devastation and loss of life in Libya and Syria and Morocco, may we be reminded of the web of life in which we live and grieve the losses to the whole human family. May we hold these joys and concerns and those yet unspoken gently in our hearts. And now, recognizing that there are many ways to know and name that which is sacred and holy, let us focus our attention as we enter into a mood of meditation, an inner place of peace and prayer. O Spirit, in whom there is harmony, source of all good, we come with our thanksgiving and our prayers. Receive the confessions that we must needs make, each one silently. For our wasted moments, our bitter words, our untrusting thoughts, or evil tempers, insincerities. For all of our daily failures to live our best life. Take us out of the loneliness of self and fill us with the fullness of truth and love. We have loved, but perhaps not enough. We have sought, but maybe not diligently. We have seen, but perhaps not perceived. We have heard, but may have not understood. We have hoped for things heavenly, but cling to things earthly. Help us to rise above all of our weaknesses and fears, be the guide of our minds and the strength of our wills, that in simplicity and steadfastness we may do our daily work, and in patience and quietness meet our daily cares. Let the still small voice speaking in our inmost conscience whisper that the time to come be not as the past, but that finding, perceiving, understanding, and loving, we may yet have rest and joy undisturbed forever. Amen.
Station.
We invite you to stay seated and join us in responsively singing, and I will be doing the spoken parts for our hymn number 1037. The words will be on the slides. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time we have struck out in anger without just cause.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For each time that our greed has blinded us to the needs of others.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For the selfishness which sets us apart and alone.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For losing sight of our humanity.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
For those and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of our separateness.
We forgive ourselves and each other. We begin again in love.
As I said in the beginning of the service, we're entering into the Jewish season of Rosh Hashanah. It is not only a celebration, but it also begins a process of reckoning. It asks people to look over their past year, to acknowledge the mistakes they may have made, not to bring judgment, just to be honest with oneself. Now, we Unitarian Universalists are not always big on talking about mistakes. We certainly don't like to talk about sins. For some of us, it may evoke rituals of confession, which may have either seemed rote or castigating. But I think we pay a price for not going through a process of reckoning, such as the Jewish process, because it can lead us into a trap of perfectionism, believing that we must be and do all things perfectly. And of course, we all make mistakes. We're all capable of hurting others. We've all experienced hurt at another's hand. When we neglect attending to these basic human realities, we can create a kind of box around ourselves in which we are embarrassed to admit the things that we've done wrong, which makes it hard to then apologize. And sometimes we can't find our way toward forgiving those who harm us. So I want to talk today about that last part, because forgiveness isn't an easy topic. When I was still a ministerial student, I attended a workshop on the subject at General Assembly with some of our finest theologians on the panel, and each one was asked the question, is true forgiveness possible? And the last one to speak, the late Jack Taylor, had the most honest answer of all of them. He said, "Damned if I know." But then he went on to say this. He said he's grown to believe that forgiveness is not an act of will. It is an act of grace. It is not an act of will. It is an act of grace. That phrase lingered with me for years. It left me with the sense that I was never going to fully wrestle this concept to the ground, and it would continue to speak to me in different ways as I go through different experiences. We hear a lot about forgiveness these days in the context of the Me Too movement, as well as in conversations about people of color horrifically wounded by white racism. Where's forgiveness, we hear over and over again? When are they ever going to get over it? I admit to a great deal of frustration and anger when I hear forgiveness bandied about that way. Because what does it do? It again puts the burden on the person who has been abused. Before any real acknowledgement of the harm, before any efforts at atonement, before any apology even. What bothers me most about these calls for forgiveness is that they almost always come from the people who haven't actually been harmed. So let me say this clearly. The only one who can offer true forgiveness is the one who is harmed. And it places such a burden on that person. At this point, I want to give a trigger warning to folks that I'll be talking about some very difficult experiences like rape and violence, and so you are free to get up and walk out if this is too much for you. No judgment. There's not a word of this sermon that I want anyone to hear as "you must forgive." What I do want to try to explore is the inner process that we can go through when we contemplate how to forgive others. And the greatest resource on this that I know of is in the book by the late Bishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter, the Reverend Mofo Tutu. It is a hard read. They tell story after story about people who have been horrifically harmed and people who have dealt terrible blows, literally and figuratively, to others, and yet all of whose lives have been transformed by forgiveness. They're quick to say what forgiveness is not, that forgiving does not mean forgetting the harm. It does not mean denying the harm. It does not mean pretending that the harm did not happen or that the injury might not have been as bad as it really was. All of these are what we call cheap grace. Quite the opposite is true. True forgiveness comes only when the harm is named, when the extent of the injury is told and acknowledged. It may or may not involve a reconciliation with the perpetrator. It may not even be any kind of conversation with the perpetrator. But at some point, there's a decision made to not let one's life be forever consumed with the harm that has been done. As they say, without forgiveness, we remain tethered to the person who harmed us, trapped, tied together with chains of bitterness. Until we can forgive the person who harmed us, that person will hold the keys to our happiness. That person will be our jailer. When we forgive, we take back control of our own fate and our own feelings. We become our own liberators. We don't forgive to help the other person. We don't forgive for others. We forgive to free ourselves. Forgiveness, in other words, is actually the best form of self-interest. This is true both spiritually and scientifically. A few years back, I read an article written by the journalist Deborah Kopeikin, who had a huge epiphany after she watched the Kavanaugh hearings. Deborah Kopeikin was a successful photojournalist who carried a terrible secret. The night before her college graduation in 1988, she was raped by someone she trusted. I won't go into details, but she tried to report it the day after, and she was told, "You're not going to be believed, and you should move on with your life. You're graduating. You should just move on." And she did, burying this painful experience, becoming an outward success, but she was always haunted by that night. And when she watched the Kavanaugh hearings and saw Dr. Ford being berated and blamed for her experience, her inner outrage exploded. Without thinking much about it, she sat down and wrote an email to the man who had abused her, telling him of her experience that night and all the ways in which he damaged her physically, emotionally, spiritually. And within 20 minutes, her phone rang. It was her perpetrator, saying the most important words: "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was blacked out drunk. I have no memory of this, but that is no excuse." Instead, in the most gentle way possible, he asked her to tell him her story. And she did, and he listened. And he pledged to find some way to pay forward the great debt that he now knew he owed. And Deborah Kopeikin felt freer than she ever had in her adult life. In this story, we see all of the elements that the Tutus say create the opportunity for real forgiveness. They describe it as a fourfold path: telling the story, naming the hurt, granting forgiveness, and renewing or releasing the relationship. Each of these steps is worthy of a sermon in and of itself, but what I find so interesting is that the same 4 steps apply whether you're trying to forgive someone or whether you're the one who is asking for forgiveness. If you're asking for forgiveness, you need to listen to the story without defensiveness or justification. Be able to acknowledge and name the hurt. Ask humbly for forgiveness, knowing that it may or may not be granted, and pledge yourself to rebuilding the relationship if that is offered. I was talking with an old friend of mine the other night who reminded me about an experience I had had with this complicated concept of forgiveness. It was about another former friend of both of ours whom I had been quite close to at one time. He was someone who was always the life of the party, quick with a witty retort and quirky way of looking at things, but when this friend started drinking, which he did in increasingly uncontrolled ways, his wit grew cruel. In the hard light of day, he was always apologetic and was constantly asking for forgiveness, and mostly I granted it because he seemed legitimately repentant. But as his drinking escalated, his cruelty escalated, and I finally put an end to the friendship. Many years later, he contacted me out of the blue, and he asked me to meet with him. He'd been in recovery for his alcoholism, and he wanted to offer his amends to me. I was actually quite excited to meet him to talk about this because I was hoping to see that friend whom I had first become fond of again. When we met, he immediately went into what felt like a memorized speech, bringing up the harmful things that he had done to me in a way that actually reawakened my original trauma. He seemed unconcerned that I was getting more and more distressed. And he said, "You can tell me more about the ways in which I hurt you." That was not the conversation I wanted to have. And then I realized it was still all about him. He was doing the prescribed thing without listening at all to me, without any sense that it really had pierced his conscience. And so for weeks after this conversation, I replayed this trauma over and over again until this friend I had been talking to intervened with her wisdom. She said, "Did you really expect that he would change? In fact, he was being the person he always had been. You just hadn't been willing to see it in the beginning." This reminded me of the wisdom of another friend that has challenged me for decades. He said, "I trust everyone. I just trust them to be themselves." I trust everyone. I just trust them to be themselves. All of this made me realize that I had been trying all along to fix him. By constantly offering him what I now see as false grace, I was offering him a path to continuing to wound me. But what my other friend helped me to see was that I was still attached to this fantasy that I could help him. I had my own work to do on the ways in which I could be codependent. I needed to think about my relationships differently and reckon with ways in which I could actually be controlling as well. Oh my God, what a surprise. And when I started concentrating on my own work, my pain and resentment of him faded away, and I finally felt free of the burden of that relationship. Because ultimately, and this is the hardest part of the message that the tutus try to give us, in our own ways, we are all broken. Out of that brokenness, we inevitably hurt others. Forgiveness is the journey we take toward healing the broken parts. It's about how we become whole again. Not just whole within ourselves, but whole within humanity. They quote Henry Wordsworth, who said, "If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each person's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. When we have a hatred for others, we carry that hatred in our own hearts, and it harms us often as much as they harm us." We are created for fellowship. We are created to form the human family, existing together because we were made for one another. We're not made for exclusivity or total self-sufficiency, but for interdependence. We break this essential law of our being at our own peril. We take care of our world by taking care of each other. It is as simple and as difficult as that. We're all probably aware of that searing photograph of a young girl burned by napalm during the Vietnam War, running down the street, ripping the clothing from her small body. Her vulnerability and her pain helped the world see what the war was inflicting on so many, and I believe turned the tide against that war. Much later, as a young woman and mother, she visited the Vietnam Veterans Memorial and she placed a wreath upon it, saying, "If I could talk face to face with the pilot who dropped that bomb, I would tell him we cannot change the past, but we should try to do good things for the present and for the future to promote peace. I forgive. I forgive." Which finally leads me to my other favorite definition of forgiveness: giving up the hope that we can create a better past. Giving up the hope that we can recreate a better past. To release ourselves from the burden of holding on to that hurtful past. So back to Jack Taylor, forgiveness is not an act of will, but an act of grace. It cannot be forced upon another. We cannot even force it within ourselves. But when we let the grace of our commitment to a way of living without hatred free us, a new kind of liberation can be found. It is a wish I have for all of us as we enter into this new year together. Amen. We have great depths within us which we have never plumbed, great insight and intuition, great reservoirs of love. The path to them leads through places of emptiness and fear. Let us pray for courage and perseverance as we seek the treasure of our own hidden places, of the faith and trust and hope that lie there. May we learn the wisdom that begins within ourselves. Please rise in body or spirit as we extinguish our chalice together. Please hold hands if you so choose. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of vision. As we go forth, let us heal and transform ourselves and our world through reason and love. Please stay standing for our final hymn filled with loving kindness.